Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a white sage plant. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I've known this one a long time. I love the oil that the leaves make. It's a wonderful scent, kind of an essential oil. Wow, there's a beautiful cloud. When I used to live in the Central Valley, we would often have sort of big sky events because it's so flat there, right? So for a time, at certain times you could see very far in the sky. And there were some amazing cloudscapes there. Really beautiful. And powerful and stunning, provocative. Today is Christmas Eve. In the West and in some other countries that celebrate Christmas. It's always been an important time for me for a number of reasons. Some of them personal, some of them related to my family and our gatherings when I was younger. My grandmother was the matron of the family, and she was also kind of the thread work that held our family together and ensured that we were able to be with each other on Christmas. We had a place to do that, and she would do the cooking and decorating. It was a very exciting time for me as a child, and always a profound and happy time, even though not everyone in my family was happy about it. Still true today. It's a bit more difficult now that I'm older and I'm often by myself on Christmas. And there are a lot of people who think that I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but there are many people who think that the Western holidays are nonsense and our celebrations are phony and superficial and commercialist, and it's a consumer event. And while that perspective has some validity, some degree of merit, There's something far more amazing going on than we ordinarily are able to pay attention to. And part of the reason why it's very difficult for us to understand these things, and rare, is not precisely because we don't know enough about history, because knowledge isn't really the problem. And knowledge of history, while useful and in some ways beneficial, isn't actually, it sort of just maintains the representational overlays and elaborates them, right? So knowledge isn't the same thing as intimacy. But if we were intimate with history, then we would have insight. And insight is very useful. And when more or less truthful, extremely trustworthy, far more trustworthy than knowledge. Oh, there's something back here that I'd like to show you. So, this tree here is dead. Pretty sure it's completely dead. Though it's not entirely clear how a tree dies and how long that process is. But I think that tree's been dead for a long time. But I'm pretty sure that it has a child. And I'm concerned because one day they'll take this tree down, but I don't want them to hurt the child. And so this tree here is the dead tree, and here is its child. And this is a very beautiful young fir tree. Let's see what kind of tree it is. According to the tags on the tree, which is something I'm not particularly fond of, but this tag here, it says it's a Pinus radiata, a Monterey pine, Pinaceae. So I'm very fond of this little tree, and this is the tree I think of as my Christmas tree. I love this little baby tree very much, and I hope that the people who take this other dead tree down don't disturb it. But in general, the humans are not careful about such things and are very stupid, so I'm worried about that little tree's future because I love it. Now, there are some forms of knowledge that are rich enough to approach intimacy. But intimacy is not the same as knowledge, even though in old languages, the words that were relatively synonymous with knowledge had connotations that resembled intimacy, so that, for example, many of us have heard anyway that to know someone in the Bible often meant to have sex with them. And of course, sex seems a very intimate thing, but it isn't necessarily. It isn't necessarily intimate. It can become intimate, it can be intimate, but it can also be very superficial, or utilitarian, or even abusive, or, there's all kinds of different things sex can be. So it isn't just intimacy. Many of the people that I know, particularly intellectuals, are extremely skeptical about holidays like Easter or Christmas, and are fond of criticizing them. There are problems with becoming critically intelligent. And one of the most terrifying problems, one of the worst traps for people who develop advanced intellectual sensitivity and awareness, is the trap of criticality, because that's really the low-hanging fruit of intelligence. It's the worst. It's generally the most toxic and violent, emotionally violent and restrictive and painful and impoverished aspect of intelligence, because it's very easy to go around pointing out what isn't good or what's not right about things. A better move is to take what's good about something and expand it so dramatically that it overwhelms the negative aspects of what is being, what would ordinarily be examined or otherwise criticized. And an even better move than that is to take the seeds of something really beautiful from something that's otherwise awful and create and invent and instruct something so profoundly positive and wonderful and nourishing and healing and medicinal that the memory of the thing that the seeds were taken from fades completely, or is transformed into something so beautiful, so noble, so obviously nourishing and trustworthy, that nobody doesn't want to be involved, right? That everybody wants in on this wonderful thing. And the grim philosophers would say, well, there is no such thing. That's just ideal. You're just being an idealist. There's nothing like that. There is something like that. Warmth when it's cold is like that. Food when you're hungry is like that. Love when you're lonely is like that. Real intelligence, insight, deep awareness and understanding, they are like this. Yeah? So there are many things like this. And this is the more truthful embodiment of the possibilities of intelligence. It is in creativity, not criticism. So whenever we can show what is truly beautiful and good by taking the pieces of something that had been corrupted or had become poisonous or vicious or toxic, and we can, from those seeds, invent a whole new way of being together, with and for each other, for all the beings, for the history and future of life on our world and in time-space. Then we have done something worthy of our emergence in material existence as human beings, and as beings in general, and as souls. As someone who has deep intimacy with Christmas, an intimacy that might seem accidental and yet is not entirely accidental. I understand, the complaints. I won't here reiterate them because I don't think it's worth it, and everyone already knows them. Pretty much everyone. Many people. I'm not too interested in that. What I remember isn't so much the superficiality or the commercialism, it's the sparkling light in my grandmother's eyes, and even my relatively reticent mother's eyes. She liked to sleep in on Christmas, and everyone used to harass her because, oh, look. It's the nightly convocation of crows. And interestingly, I don't think the ravens do that. The crows do it. Oh, there's more. I think that was about 93 or 4 crows. Though it could have been 87 or 8 or 9. So my mother used to like to sleep in on Christmas morning, and everybody would get very impatient with her. And then again, my mother liked to sleep in general. She's a bit of a night owl. I think she liked the quietude of the deep night and also the relief of responsibility. Oh, 4 more. Yeah, I'm going to go with my original estimate in the 90s, late 90s. What I remember is the spirit of the day and the joy that I felt. Of course, I was very excited about getting objects and presents and toys and things as a child, which isn't unnatural. And sometimes I was sad on that day. And I think that's a complex issue that I'll not explore here. It's more or less personal. Although part of why I was sad was just that Actually, I think I'll stick to my original decision not to explore it. These holidays that are traditionally held by us, they have very ancient and somewhat esoteric origins. And though they've been Christianized, so to speak, over time, I have good reason to believe they're vastly older than Christianity is. And probably older even than Judaism. Though Judaism, it's not apparent to me that it was common for the Jews to celebrate a winter holiday around the time of Christmas. It's not clear whether they were concerned about the solstices. To me, it's not clear. I just don't know. Though I know I have some knowledge of Judaism, and it's not entirely superficial. So there is, of course, the winter solstice, which could be understood as the rebirth of the sun, in a sense. And in another sense, the sort of announcement of the coming end of winter. And for many ancient peoples, winter, at least in the hemispheres that have winter during those months, that we associate with winter here in America, in the northern, the northwestern hemisphere. I'm not really sure what to call our hemisphere. But the winter, wherever it was experienced, was grim, very grim. a lot of suffering, a lot of death. Children would die, elderly people would die, parents and lovers and enemies would die. And there was a lot of sickness, there was poverty, there was starvation. Very difficult to get food in the winter. Surviving the winter months was grueling. And often people would even measure their lives in terms of how many winters they had survived for this reason. And so the point at which the winter begins to be less severe is important, but also though most of the cultures, the ancient cultures lived with lunar time for very important reasons. Nature's following lunar time more intimately, or no, that's not really true. Lunar time is a faster pace of change, right, than solar time. So it's a faster marker. Our clocks are nonsense, but in terms of clocks, it would be like minutes rather than day, or like hours rather than Actually, it's hard to find a good comparison because I want something with a similar ratio. So obviously our word for months, right? It's months instead of years is the right ratio, approximately. Our months are derived from lunar time, but they're regularized and no longer pay attention to the cycle of the moon, which is tragic, actually, for us. Now, we have these seemingly unusual myths that to many moderns seem quite bizarre and completely absurd. The myths like the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. And the recent history of these myths is not as interesting to me as their ancient history. And some of their ancient history is truly quite profound and different from what we might imagine when we think about things like some of the more esoteric modern ideas like, oh, Santa represents the death cap mushroom, or is actually Satan in disguise, or something like this. Of course, Santa, Satan, right? They're pretty similar. Now, I don't intend to go into great detail about this, but what I want to explain is that there is something like a network that touches all the hearts of all the people on Earth. And there are beings that travel in that network, and there are beings that bring gifts to those capable of receiving them inside that network. And they don't always bring them at exactly the same time of year, but there is a time of year that is associated with this. And this is a non-ordinary being. And it has something like a vehicle. And the vehicle is drawn by something not entirely different from reindeer. And bells are involved, and spirals and other things. Sparkling lights, arrayed in a scalar cone, at the top of which is something very astonishing. All of these things commemorate actual experiences of our ancestors and memories, deep, maybe cellular or genetic memory. And so for all of the seeming validity of the criticisms of Christmas, those criticisms were never familiar with its origins. They have no experience of them whatsoever. And if they did, I think we'd be much more circumspect about trying to tear it down. Because there is something like Santa Claus, and the Christmas tree is a remembrance of something that still exists and that we participate in every moment of our thought, speech, action, and concern throughout our lives. And the gifts underneath the tree that we give to each other on this day, they represent something non-ordinary and profound and holy, regardless of how we think about the meaning of holy. Of course, some people just think it's a nonsensical idea, but it isn't. Because even those people who think that, they have certain things that they hold as inviolate. Yeah? And for those things, for those people, those things are holy. Yeah? Even if their inviolate things are things like logical principles, which are a fairly absurd thing to make holy. Because logical principles are disembodied. Largely. So, one might ask, well, how do you know these things, and what do you know of them, and what is the source of your knowledge, right? As if to say that, exceptional claims require exceptional evidence, and so on and so forth. An idea that is sometimes true, but sometimes wrong. How I know these things is I've had direct experience of their essence. In my own experience of my origin as a being, as a soul, and as a human being. My recollected experience. I know there is a non-ordinary aspect to our humanity, and it doesn't necessarily follow the calendar, but there are unique players in the constellation of our interiority that get encharactered in our cultures by beings like Cupid, the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, Mnemosyne, the Muses, Zeus, the Titans, right? The Greek, what we refer to as gods, but again, I think us moderns are very confused about this idea. We're very confused about what ancient people thought and believed and how and why they thought and believed such things. And often what we refer to as gods are not really gods. They are more like angels. Yeah. They're much more like angels. And of course, Cupid is characterized as a cherub, right? Which in Western art is often imagined or visualized as an infant angel with wings, a very small angel. There are small angels. They're very powerful, however. They're not infantile. So I've had experience of many of these things, and few of them muchly resemble the images and characterizations we're exposed to, and so perhaps that's part of why they're easily dismissed. It's not my goal here today to talk about, what I think an angel is. But let me explain a few things briefly. It is both, it has a likeness to the images that we've made. There are likenesses. And it is such a provocative thing, such a shocking form of being and intelligence, that it would obliterate all of our categories. Our language would be destroyed by it. We could not survive. Our minds would not survive even a momentary exposure to its mind. It is in our interiority like the sun is to the earth, right? And without the sun being extremely distant from us, we would be instantly obliterated by it. We would not survive, a thousandth of a second of exposure to it. Thankfully, the angels can shield us from direct, immediate, full contact so that it is possible for human beings to have experiences of them. And this story is very complex and it does not muchly resemble our religions. And yet, again, there is synonymy and homonymy in some aspects. Now it's raining. I knew it might rain a little bit. Could make it hard to continue my video, though. We'll see what happens. Wind has come. There's a tree nearby here that's a pretty good shield against the rain. It's kindly shielded me before, even this afternoon. So perhaps I will go to it for a little while and see if it will protect me long enough to complete my video. So I guess my goal today is to kind of sing the praises of the origins of our holidays and to encourage people to be cautious about being too critical of these things, even though, admittedly, their modern incarnations are often impoverished of the depth that the wrapping paper and decorations occlude. Oh, yeah, it's still raining. Okay, the tree is shielding me, though, pretty well. I remember what I learned in my recollections, even though now those experiences are somewhat distant from my life. And I remember them with reverence and awe and wonder and joy. And I'm grateful to have been able to have them while still a human being. A mortal being in a strange and modern world that's often very superficial and confusing, and often very lonely. I wish all of you deep joy, insight, awareness, creativity, play, joyful success in all the aspects of your life. I wish you liberation. I wish you love and gentle kindness and wonder and awe and fulfillment of the promise of your incarnation. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye for now.